Warm summer greetings, everyone. Welcome to MAI's webinar, Organically Grown Editors, How to Find and Nurture New Editors with Bernice Lee. Good morning or good evening to you all. This is Ramon Rocha greeting you on behalf of MAI. We're happy to see 41 friends from different parts of the world registering for this webcast. Let me do a quick sound check. Are you hearing us all right? Please type. Barbara, are you hearing us? Thank you. We just want to do it right and make sure that everyone hears our presentation today. Thank you, Priscilla. We will entertain questions towards the end of the presentation. Please feel free to use the chat window on the lower right hand of your screen. In my travels consulting with Christian publishers, I often hear this coming from them. We lack editors to come alongside our local. We would like to see a few more qualified editors to help our writers improve their manuscript. Please help us. MAI acknowledges this need, and we are glad to offer this webinar to help address this issue. Today, we are blessed to have a top-notch editor as our speaker. Let me introduce our very own, well-known and well-loved Miss Bernice Lee.
Hi, everyone.
Since 2006, together with husband Pastor Sue Intan, Bernice has been leading Graceworks, a publishing and training consultancy based in Singapore. She has been involved in publishing since 1981 when she joined Oxford University Press in Singapore. The years 1991 to 2005, she managed the publishing program of Armour Publishing, which she co-founded with Christina Lim. Bernice serves as the chair of MAI Asia. Please warmly welcome Bernice Lee.
Hi, everyone.
Take the floor, Bernice.
Thank you. Thanks, Ramon. I just wanted to say that you're free to interject, ask questions if there's something I'm saying which isn't clear to you. And if you're not hearing me, please also type it in so that I'll know. There will be points in this webinar when I'll ask you to actually make suggestions by typing in your comments, so that it's a bit more interactive and not just a talking head speaking to you. Right, so today we'll be looking at how to find and then to nurture editors. But in order that we're all on the same page, I think it's important for us to have certain things defined. So there are some general assumptions that I am making. I'm assuming you are an editor, or you want to be an editor. You are in some position of oversight because we're talking about getting new editors and nurturing them. And you may or may not edit Christian books, but you are a Christian editor. Hi, Ina. Okay, so although much of what I'm saying would be relevant for people who have some staff, I also realize that there are those of you who have very small publishing enterprises, and it may just be one or two editors, it may even be one editor, but a lot of these principles can be adapted and applied. So, and if there are areas that you need clarification about, you can also do that later. So, for those of you who are not editing Christian books, I think it's wonderful that you are being salt and light out there in the world. And I know of several authors that I've worked with who are Christians, but who didn't do overtly Christian books. But then, because of their Christian worldview, it comes through in their writing anyway. So, yep. Let's now talk about, before we find the editors, we need to establish who are these editors. This is where I'd like you to key in that little screen. What is your idea of an editor? What does an editor do?
Excuse me, Bernice.
Yes.
You're coming in choppy. Maybe
Oh,
maybe you can turn off your video. It might help.
turn
Now
off
they
my.
will not see you.
Oh, okay. How do I turn off my video?
I will turn it off.
Okay, all right. Cool. I'm happy not to be seen.
Sige, go ahead.
Is it clear now? Is it clearer now? Ladies, can you
Okay.
hear me? Okay, good. Well, I was asking, would you key in on your little keypad what your idea of an editor is? What does an editor do? No one's keying in anything. Okay, an editor takes what is rough and polishes it. Good. What else? Priscilla is keying in something. There's a bit of a lag between when people. Okay. Hi, Sophina. An editor helps to make a body of text sound clearer. Yes. Editor checks and corrects the script with the audience in mind. Good. I'm obviously talking to editors, so that's good. Because in conversation with some young and not so young editors, oh, Ina is not hearing anything. Anyway, I'll carry on for the sake of the rest. When I speak to some young and not so young editors, they often have certain misconceptions about what their job is or what their role is. Some see themselves as someone who takes the function of a spell checker, someone who would check for spelling. Others say the grammar Nazis, so they would check for tenses and for grammar. Yet others would say that they are servants, they're helpers. Some have said that they're midwives. So as some of you said just now, you help to take what is rough and polish it. You help to get ideas out of people and you help them put these into shape. So you help birth something, like a midwife. I think most importantly for me, an editor is a child of God. A Christian editor is a child of God. And in fact, we are all of the above, if you ask me, because in the course of doing our editing, we do check spelling, we do check the typos, we do check for facts. But one of the key traits for me, for an editor, is we are called. We're called to be a servant. And who do we serve? Four groups come, well, one of them is, yes, I suppose it's a group too. Four groups come to mind. The first is we serve God. He's the one who's called us to do what we do. He's the one that has gifted us with the ability, the talents, and the obsessive compulsive abilities to do what we do. Then we serve the publishing house that we are part of. Some of you come from big ones. Some of you are standalone. Whatever it is, we do have an organizational house style that we need to, well, I was going to say obey, but that we need to follow. And sometimes we're called to be entrepreneurial for those publishing houses as well. So that's number two. Number three, we serve the author. Because as I said earlier, if we're a midwife and we're helping to birth that baby, that book, we need to serve the author. We need to befriend the author. We need to sometimes advocate for the author as well, because you may find that since you know the manuscript really well and you know the author well, you see things in the manuscript. You see good points to the manuscript that the publishing house may not be convinced about, and so you have to act as advocate as well for your author. The fourth group that you serve is the reader, the consumer, because there is no point doing a book that no one wants to read. Well, sometimes, okay, if you have a good marketing department, you can actually persuade an Eskimo to buy a fridge. But all things being equal, I think we do have to know the market. We need to know what the readers need, and we have to serve the reader as well. You can't have an author writing a book for children using words that require a dictionary every other sentence. So as the editor, you have to be running interference for various groups. Right, so let me go on to. So what makes for a good editor? I'm married to a pastor, so I'm giving you a sermon, 3 points. Alliteration even. 3 C's: character, competence, and core values. So let's look at what this entails. Let's look at character. Okay, Tozer said that at the bottom of all these things, whether it's service or work or activity, and giving meaning to them, will be the inward habit of beholding God. I think it's so important as editors that we have this inward habit of beholding God, because in order to be able to serve the way that we're called to serve, we have to love God and we need to know God. We need to behold God and let that flow out of all that we do. We need to know the character of God, and we need to reflect that character. All that I'm saying to you and sharing with you now is not just for you. This is all bouncing back to me as well. This is a mirror for me as well, and it's in preparing for this webinar, it's been a great journey, because I have been reminded again of why I'm an editor and why I love being an editor and why I feel called to be an editor. Okay, so character of the editor. If you are practicing that inward habit of beholding God and of communing with God and drawing your strength from God, then you will also be learning to be more and more like Jesus, which means that you will learn to have his humble, caring servant's heart. Someone once said that he's very proud that he's so humble. Well, I hope we won't be so proud of our humility, but we will let it flow out from us in the work that we do. I'm just sharing all these things so that we are clear in our minds what a good editor is, and then we will talk about finding those editors and then nurturing them. A good editor needs to read widely. It'd be difficult if you're an editor and you don't like to read. I'm not sure how you can then do your work, but the reading widely part is what helps you to be able to spot mistakes, factual gaps. Yeah, if I actually Googled something as an experiment. I Googled the pyramids of Gaza, and it appeared on the internet. The pyramids in Gaza. Of course there aren't. It's pyramid in Giza. So if you're not widely read enough, some of these things may slip through in your editing, and then the book will be the worse for it. Editors, okay, I'm just going to run through this. Editors are diligent, self-motivated, or editors hope to be disciplined and pay attention to details. You need good relational skills because you are serving various groups of people and various organizations. And you need to be able to manage conflict. You'll be surprised how often that happens. I've left that blank there because I guess for some people, the number of years you need in editorial work in order to be a good editor would depend on perhaps the environment that you're working in, the kind of mentoring you get, and the experience you're getting in your workplace. You need a strong knowledge of the complexities of writing and editing, obviously. But to understand the complexity of writing helps you to empathize with your writers and your authors. Obviously, you need an excellent knowledge of the language. And because many of us are called to edit Christian books, key to all this is a good understanding of the Bible and evangelical Christian thinking. Otherwise, how are you going to sift through and spot heresies if they're there? You need a good grasp of general knowledge, excellent oral and written communication skills, because in this day of emails, where people shoot emails to one another, without thinking, written communication skills are crucial because you could antagonize your author, you could antagonize the publisher without meaning to if you're not careful. Then you also need to be able to use computer software now for your editing as well. I generally still like to do my editing on hard copies because I like to be able to see what is there and not have all these lines running across the screen with copious lists of things that have been done to the text. I do recognize that for many of us, we may need to communicate with our authors over a long distance, and the internet is still the most efficient way to do this. And so we track our changes online, and then we send the file over to our authors. Okay, so that's computer software. And sometimes even design software, some knowledge is helpful too, because it gives you the ability to make suggestions with a bit more knowledge when you're talking to the designers. And in that respect also, good aesthetic judgment. Right, so what are your core values as an editor? Some of you have said about making books better. And for me, it's always been that a good book can be made better. because we bring an objective eye to something. The author is so closely linked with what he or she has written. Sometimes it's not easy to see the gaps or the faults in the manuscript. And you need to be able to raise questions that objectively guide the writer. Don't be afraid to be honest, but be sensitive when you are making your honest statements to the author. Constantly be concerned for how every word, sentence, punctuation mark works, and provide a listen. This is where being a relational person helps, because as an editor, like I said earlier, you're a midwife, you're helping to birth something. And very often you need to be the one that the author bounces things off, and you need to provide a listening ear, whether it's for ideas, problems, or solutions. You adjust to the author and not vice versa. I have had people who've interned with me, making all sorts of changes to manuscripts that I've asked them to work on. And very often they change the whole tone and style of what the author has written. And that's not kosher at all. And we need to affirm the writer's uniqueness. Okay. Recognize that the style is it is the writer's name on the cover, and you do not impose your style on the writer. I often wonder what would have happened if Eugene Peterson didn't have a good editor for the message. Would it have seen the light of day? Maybe not. Anyway, always be concerned on behalf of the reader, and never say to your author, "I told you so," even though you are probably more often than not 100% correct. Okay. Where would you find a good book editor? This is where I'd like you to key in some suggestions so that I know you're awake.
Can we hear from our participants?
Okay, Safina's typing something. Ina's typing something.
In a coffee shop.
Okay. That's an interesting one. In a publishing house. Okay. Larry. Recommendations. Yes, yes. I think yes. That's a good one too. There are a few places that I think I can, well, word of mouth. You know, you might get recommendations from people who have worked with someone. That in Singapore, for instance, there are quite a few people who freelance. And so if you know of people who have used these freelancers and they're reliable and they're good, then that kind of referral would be very helpful. I'm not sure about in Asia, but I know overseas, well, further in the West, they do have ads in newspapers and magazines. We don't get that so much here, but I guess it is possible to put in an ad and get responses for that. Internet postings. I find that sometimes reading people's blogs helps, because then you know that the level of their language, you can tell whether they have a facility with the language. Also on social media, these are obviously places that you can hunt these editors down. Chat groups too. There are a few on Facebook for editors specifically, so that might be another way to look for good editors. And internships, for me, that has really worked very well. It's helpful because you get a chance to try out the person. And if the person is not right for your organization or for you, then there is a time limit to that person's tenure with you. So maybe it's a 6-month internship or a 6-week internship, and it gives you a chance to check that person out and see whether this will work or this won't work. And also you get a good feel for the attitude. For me, skills can be learned, and even knowledge can be acquired, but attitude is something that is quite critical as far as I'm concerned in terms of finding a good editor, because how that person reacts to situations or behaves interpersonally, all that makes a lot of difference as an editor, right? So how do we grow these editors? We'll do the ABCs. Okay. A for ambience, just a big word for a good work environment. And B for benefits, because, well, as the Bible tells us, the worker deserves his wages. And C for communications, meaning lines of responsibility, accountability. In terms of the ambience, the conducive work environment, I think it's important that we provide a good work environment, because we've all, well, sorry, not we've all, but some of us have had the misfortune of working in less than desirable work environments. And that's really difficult, because that makes it so difficult for you to do a good job when you want to do a good job. So, and you know, when the management of the editorial team is good, because then you will have editors who are motivated, who are lifelong learners, who are good team players, and there's a healthy connection between the members of the team. But when the work environment isn't managed well, then you may get editors who are unfocused. You get editors who are overworked, burnt out. Does this sound familiar to some of you? Often sick, or they're complaining, or they're unproductive. And that really, isn't what we want. So create a conducive work environment. Editors need to have quiet, but they also need to have places where they can let their hair down, for instance. So it's quite important that they have their own space so that they can focus on the reading that they have to do and the editing, and also a good computer these days is almost a non-negotiable, right? So benefits, let's move on to that. I think wherever possible, we try to pay what the person deserves. For many of us, because we work in well, not exactly NGOs, but some of us work in ministry-based publishing houses, and it's not always possible to pay a top-notch salary, but I think we can compensate for that by providing other kinds of incentives and perks. I know that many publishing houses will allow their staff to buy the books at big discounts, and I think that that's a good thing. Also, things like annual leave and medical leave. All this sounds like no-brainers, but it's important to think these things through, because if we're not conscious of what needs to be done for looking after the welfare of our editors, it's going to be difficult to nurture them. They're not going to want to stay on very long to be nurtured to begin with. So staff discounts, time off in lieu of overtime, pay maybe. There are all sorts of ways that we can provide benefits for our editors. And okay, lines of communication. It's very important that we establish clear standards, procedures, and boundaries. Without that, it's like a garden bed of roses that doesn't have a border. It's just allowed to grow, and the weeds come in, and it's just a mess. So if you run an editorial team, you need to set clear standards. What is the manual of style you use? What is the house style? What are the procedures that you have to ensure that there are checks and balances, that things don't fall through the cracks in terms of every stage of the production of a particular book, or seeing a book from manuscript, seeing a project from manuscript to book. Communicate clearly what you expect, and have clear lines of reporting as well, so that it's not just a one-way conversation or relationship, it's two ways. Staff need to know that their work-life balance matters as well. So for the editors, do we make it clear to them, okay, this is their lunch hour, and they're entitled to that lunch hour, and they can do whatever they want in that lunch hour? Do we provide adequate orientation and training? Do we provide regular meetups to get feedback on both sides? Do we give feedback regularly, and do we receive their feedback and take it seriously? So that's for the lines of communication. Then we go on to performance evaluations. It's very difficult when people work in an organization and they don't know whether they're doing well, they're doing okay, they're doing not so good. It's important. So part of the lines of communication would involve evaluations as well. This is not because we're like the principal, making sure that you're doing your job well, and if not, we're wielding this big cane. It's not like that. It's a collaborative process, and so just as we need to know how, as more senior staff, how we are doing in terms of our interpersonal skills, it's important for the junior staff to know how they're doing, so that then they can either improve, or they can make mid-course corrections. Yeah. So when you're doing evaluations with your editors, you can either have, well, okay, the thing that I often do is there's a 3-month probation period, after which at the mid-year juncture, we would again sit down and have a look whether, like your GPS, whether you need to recalibrate to make sure that you're going in the right direction or not. And of course, annual evaluation. So those are the fixed, regular ones. But I think all year through, it's good to communicate feedback and guidance. So if the editor, the junior editor, isn't doing so well in a particular area, it doesn't come as a surprise at the end of a year to be told, oh, I'm afraid you have to leave. Because that person has never been told what was wrong and never given a chance to improve. So do this on a regular basis, and create opportunities to chat with your junior staff, and not only tell them things, but also find out things from them. Where are they hurting? what is difficult for them, how can things be made better, how can issues be addressed. And reviews should be done confidentially and impartially and professionally, so you don't make personal attacks on your editors. Practice good record keeping. Some people do this and some don't. The employee would get a copy of everything that goes into his or her personal file. Criteria for evaluations: quality and quantity of work, dependability, judgment, creativity, perseverance, achievement of goals and targets, communication, relationship skills, whether it's with team members, with superiors, with the author, with readers. Right. So, and then of course, obviously, attendance and punctuality, strengths and weaknesses. And this is something that I learned from chairman of the MAI board, Dan Elliott. He uses the fruit of the spirit to also evaluate how his staff have grown. And have they grown in the various aspects of the fruit of the spirit? Because we're not just a secular organization. If we feel that, if we say that editors are called by God, and this is a calling, a ministry, then obviously we also need to look at the spiritual growth of our staff. So now this part I'm going to gloss over, but it is important to have disciplinary policies in place, because if you don't, and people don't know that there are these things, then when something happens, then it might be a bit too late. So there are immediate penalties, or do you give written warnings first, verbal warnings? Do you review what has been done or not done and what the responses are, targeted goals and changes? So like I said earlier, I have a 3-month probationary period. It can be, for some people, 2 weeks. It could be 6 months. Sometimes you need to lengthen that to a year even. And then obviously if a grave error or a breach of trust has happened, then dismissal may be called for. Okay, how do you develop them? Provide internal and external training. You can have people come in to provide training if you don't have the capacity to do it yourselves. Map out a career path. I know for some of the smaller organizations, it may not be this nice long path as you see here, from copy editor to assistant to associate to editor, senior editor, and editorial manager and publishing director. But it helps for people to know that there is movement and there is something they can aspire to. So it's also good to assign a senior staff to mentor a younger one and encourage peer mentoring. So again, we go back to the core values. We honor God and we work with integrity. And as a senior editor, you should be able to echo what Paul says, that you follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. Delegate, don't micromanage, but be available to guide. People need to learn from their mistakes, but sometimes if we just throw them off the deep end and expect them to sink or swim, I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that is a good use of the person's time nor the company's resources. So be there to guide, but don't micromanage, because people do need to learn from mistakes that they make, although we try to minimize the mistakes. Maintain transparency in your working relationships, and again, keep lines of communication open. Be fair. Don't discriminate, whether it is between the sexes, whether it is ageism. Yeah, I think the important thing is what the person is able to do and how you can help that person to grow in the calling. Foster a strong sense of ownership and proactivity. If you allow people to make their mistakes and walk alongside them, then there would be a greater freedom to be proactive And then to be creative as well. Set in place clear channels for conflict resolution and have fun. Have fun together. Because it isn't just all about work, it's about relationships. At the end of the day, we should be in the life transformation business, whether it is editing a book, whether it is working alongside someone else. We should be helping one another grow to be more and more like Jesus. And how do we speak into someone else's life if all the time we are either scolding them, telling them off, giving them work and not hearing from them what their difficulties are? So I'm just going to end with a little anecdote. I was once told that I shouldn't fraternize with the junior staff because they would lose their respect for me. As far as I'm concerned, it's a bit like having children and bringing them up. If you only scold them, they're going to resent it. If you have opportunities to have fun together, to do things, and for them to know that you value them as people, then when the time comes for you to speak into their lives and to tell them something is wrong and to help them change, they're more ready to listen to you. So yeah, have fun. Have you know, if you're regularly having fun in the office, obviously you're not just having fun and not doing work. But if you have the opportunities to have fun, then you don't have to pay big bucks to go and do team building events because you're doing it all the time. So my final word, value each person as someone who bears the image of God and help that person to fulfill the calling and to live up to what God would want for that person. And in the process, have fun. So that's all I have for you. You can ask your questions now.
Thank you so much, Bernice. Thank you for being so generous in sharing of your experience and insights and expertise. We appreciate you, and I'm sure the participants are now typing in their questions.
Mm.
Thank you, Barbara. Several of the publishers I've consulted with may not be in the financial situation. I mean, financially, it might be difficult for them to hire editors in-house, editors, and several of them are dealing with freelance editors. I suppose your ABCs would also up to freelance. How would you deal with freelance editors and help nurture and grow them as well?
Okay. I used to be a freelance editor during the period when my children came and I stopped working full time. I kind of kept the brain ticking by doing freelance editing. And one particular organization that I freelanced with were very good because they would make space for me in the office. So although, well, the aim of freelancing was so that I could work at home, but they made me feel like I was part of the team. So there was space for me in the office, and when I could go in, I had colleagues to work alongside and people to discuss things with and to bounce ideas off. So I think providing that work environment, even for freelancers, if you're able to, would be good.
Yes, thank you. So David is asking, what do you mean by organically grown editors?
Well, as in you help them grow within the organization. Also, like I said earlier, I've had interns, and from the internships that they've done with us, we've been able to help them grow into the role of maybe editorial assistant, or even initially proofreader and then editorial assistant, and then into a more senior editorial position slowly. So growing through the ranks.
Most of your interns are from college?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I
Thank
have
you.
found that the interns that tell me that, or at least, their results say that they're very good with language. They've done English language or literature and all that. That does not necessarily equate to a good editor, because there are all these other factors that an editor needs. There's an X factor to an editor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. People are typing in their question.
Mm-hmm.
I just would
Someone has
like to
said,
point out
how do you nurture the ability to communicate? Who was that? Sorry, I didn't see.
that's
Sofina. Is that Sofina? Yeah.
Ina.
Mm. That's
Yeah,
true.
that's
That's
Ina.
true, Sofina. Um, I'm an introvert too, but I've had to learn to speak up, because if I don't, then many things suffer. Primarily the relationship between editor and author, between editor and designer, and with the marketing department. As I said earlier, we're advocates. Apart from serving the author, serving the reader, serving God and the publishing house, we're also advocates. So we have to speak on behalf of, and it takes some doing if you're an introvert. But I guess maybe writing things down first before you have to say them might help. And then as you get more and more confident with sharing and speaking, then I pray you overcome that hump and are able to communicate more readily or with less difficulty.
David, we we placed here Bernice's email address. You can follow up and write to her more questions, and Bernice is gracious enough to share her email address.
Yes,
And
please, please. I mean, we're all in this together, so if we can help one another, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Mhm. Okay, several people are typing in their question. We would like to acknowledge also Lorenzo Brook.
Yes.
We like that name, Lorenzo.
I don't know. I kind of like Larry, actually. I'm a simple person.
Barbara is asking,
Mhm.
do you bring them on as interns first
Mm,
and then help them grow?
yes. Well, that's the way that I have um, tended to do it, because
But
sorry?
you can hire
Of
experienced
course.
editors as
Yes, of
well.
course. Of course you can. But if we're talking about growing them, then that's one way
Yes.
that I find is quite effective.
Charles is asking, have you worked with older persons?
I
People who
am an
might
older
make a
person.
career change into editing. No, I mean maybe older than
No,
you.
no, I'm
Older than
joking.
you.
Yes, I have. I have actually. And because older people bring in a wealth of life experiences. So there's wisdom in addition to skill. And I think this is one industry I really have no issues with working with older people. In fact, with the maturity, they may be able to handle difficult situations better. Yeah.
Welcome, Noor. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Noor, hi.
Mm-hmm. Do you hire freelance editors or you contract them out, I suppose?
Yes, yes, I do that because we're a small organization, so we do uh, give work to freelancers. But we also have space for the freelancers to come in. So it helps for them to feel a part of the team, like I felt before. So I'm just paying it forward what I received from others that have benefited me.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions?
Other questions? Ina, thank you for your greetings.
Well, that's true, Natalie. They might have more health problems, but these days, we found that even with younger people, tendency to cut corners when it comes to sleep, and so very often they don't have enough sleep, and then they fall ill, and they come down with coughs and colds, and yeah, it may not be the major ailments that some of the older people have, but young people fall sick quite often, I found.
Charles is asking,
Yeah.
what do you find to be the most difficult area in which to train a new person in editing?
Let me think. I think these days, it used to be before. One of the more difficult things was teaching them how to mark out the manuscript well, so that the people who have to make the changes online can understand what the editor is trying to say. But nowadays, most editors actually edit online, so that problem is slightly minimized. I think helping editors to understand that the manuscript belongs to the author, not you. With all good intentions, many editors try to rewrite whole paragraphs. And I have no doubts that what they've rewritten probably reads better, but it just may not be the style of the author. So I have had to constantly tell people, make suggestions for changes, but don't insist on your style. The name on the cover of the book is the author's, not yours. And while you do want to help the author to make what's good better, you have to respect that the author has a particular style, and maybe for that particular manuscript, the casual tone of the writing is intentional. Yeah, so I have found that getting editors to not be too trigger happy when it comes to making changes to text.
Sometimes, under time pressure, deadline is coming, maybe the temptation is for the editor to rewrite it himself or herself.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Any minimum educational requirement for a new editor?
Well, if it is for an editor's position, I would say it would be good if the person had a basic degree. That's for a full editor's position. if we're talking about an editorial assistant, I might take someone in who has an A level, which is like year 12. Is it year 12?
Mhm.
What the degree tells me is that this person has learned how to learn. I'm not asking
Mhm.
for the degree because it shows this person is more intelligent. Um, that is not necessarily an indication of how intelligent a person is or how widely read a person is. But it does tell me that this person has learned certain skills in terms of becoming a lifelong learner.
Mhm. Another question from
Mm,
Charles. What
yes.
do you find to be the greatest discouragement to a new editor in training?
Um, I think when everything that the editor tries to suggest is shot down without
By
giving
the author?
by a senior editor.
By a senior editor.
Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
because um, sometimes, as you say, Ramon, we're often short on time. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
I know a publishing house where they have the luxury of a long runway for getting projects done. But yeah, sometimes because we're all short on time, we can get short with each other. And we don't give the junior editors enough space to be heard or to make suggestions or to even let them learn through their mistakes. So I think that's really discouraging. Also, oops, my screen has changed. Um, what books enriched you as an editor? Edward England's book, of course, Unfading Vision. Um, Arthur Plotnick, actually, Elements of Editing. Um, I'm someone that reads dictionaries for fun. So, so that's one of the things that has helped enrich me. Um, and reading things by other editors. Uh, there is an editor called Anne Badiman, and I forget the title of the book, but I will send it to you at some point. And that was quite enriching as well. What else? I'm part of various Facebook groups for editors. I found some really, really helpful because of the tips they give and just being part of the discussions helps me clarify some things. But there are also some groups that I've decided I will step out because it's just full of people who are um, being catty uh, and sharing mistakes that their authors make and you know making fun of that, and I don't particularly enjoy that. I mean, if they're sharing mistakes so that they can each learn and watch out for those mistakes, that's a different thing. But in this case, it is to make fun of authors and their writing, and I think that's not life-giving. It's not a Christian group to begin with, so yeah, no loss for me stepping out.
Thank you. Okay, we're just about in our last minute. Any closing thoughts, closing comments, Bernice, on finding and developing editors?
Mm,
Anything you might want to highlight from our discussion? It's been a very interesting hour, and we appreciate the participation of our friends from around the world. They have typed
yes,
in
yes.
a lot of questions, and we appreciate them.
Um, Well, I think I would still like to leave all of you with the thought that each of these editors is made in the image of God, and we need to accord each other the love and the respect and the care. So whatever it is we do it as unto the Lord. So I leave you with Colossians 3:23.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Bernice. This has been a very helpful presentation, helpful webinar, and thank you for everyone who have joined in live.
Yes, thank
A
you.
good number of you. Yes, a good number of 13 people who have joined us live today. Thank you for your questions and thank you for your comments as well. Thank you very much, Bernice,
Oh,
on behalf
very
of the
welcome.
participants. And I'm sure they appreciate you and your insights and the teachings today. Um, Thank you also for sharing your email address so they could write to you and follow up and maybe have more questions.
Sure, surely.
Thank you for your willingness to help. Uh, Let me just invite everyone to our next two free webinars. At MAI, we are hoping and praying that the webinars have been helpful to those who register and those who watch the webinars, the recordings, if you're not able to join live. And for the next two free webinars, September 12th, will be Editor's Toolbox, Resources for Editorial Growth. So we have back-to-back topics on editing and editors. And please join us, register for September 12th. We will have Isobel Stevenson as our speaker. So now that you have found and are developing your editors, offer them the toolbox, the resources for their growth. And on October 10, we will have Pusunam Yiri to lead us on a webinar called Lead Well, Write Well. We will send out invitations to you and share with your colleagues, share with your friends, so we will have more people signing up for our webinars. Well, uh, Bernice should be the one, well, inviting you to come to Lit World 2018.
You must, you must.
2015 was such a successful Lit World in Singapore, and we would like to go back there. We really appreciate Bernice and her team for hosting us, and we are looking forward to the next Lit World in October, on October 28 to November 2 in Singapore. Mark your calendars, save up, and make sure that you are present at Lit World 2018. It's exciting, and we hope to see a lot of our friends from around the world join us at Lit World. We will send more details in the coming months. So thank you on behalf of MAI. We would like to thank you for joining us. MAI is a unique ministry of coming alongside Christian writers, editors, and publishers, especially from the hard places of the world. Visit our website, and I hope you've signed up for our newsletters and blogs and at litworld.org. So thank you, and thank you, Bernice, and thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again next webinar.
Yep.
God bless you all.
God bless. Bye.
Bye for now.